to winning isn't easy. How can you use the Social Security Administration's regulations on how to evaluate a chronic fatigue syndrome or COVID claim in your ERISA long-term disability claim? Now, I do both Social Security and ERISA work, and so I'm familiar with what the Social Security Administration has developed in terms of position papers or regulations to evaluate these types of conditions. Many long-term disability carriers who hate chronic fatigue syndrome cases do require that you apply for Social Security disability cases, but then they tend to kind of ignore the results. But I think that you can shove those ERISA regulations right in their face to fight the long-term disability carrier plans games when they contest the CFS diagnosis, because they say there's no objective evidence to support the diagnosis. Now, in the context of a Social Security disability claim, you have the burden of proving you have a medically determinable impairment, and that's established by medical evidence consisting of signs, symptoms, and laboratory findings. In both an ERISA and Social Security claim, that can be hard to prove since there's no gold standard test for the diagnosis of chronic fatigue. But the Social Security Administration has created SSR 1411, a regulation that addresses the issue. And I use this regulation in my ERISA cases when there's fights about the CFS diagnosis. So what is SSR 1411 and how can it be used in an ERISA claim? This regulation clarifies the Social Security Administration's policy on developing evidence that establishes how you document a medically determinable impairment and how the Social Security Administration evaluates the CFS impairment. Now, Social Security acknowledges that CFS is a systemic disorder, and it has a complex of symptoms that can vary in frequency, duration, and severity. The regulation reviews the history of the diagnostic criteria for CFS over the years, and it looks to the CDC criteria for the diagnostic criteria that it'll accept. And you can review this by going to the CDC site. What Social Security wants to see is one or more of the following signs clinically documented over a period of at least 6 consecutive months in your medical records. 1, swollen or tender lymph nodes on physical examination. 2, non-exudative pharyngitis. 3, persistent reproducible muscle tenderness on repeated examinations, including the presence of positive tender points, or any other medical signs that are consistent with medically accepted clinical practices and other evidence, such as, but not limited to, acute infections, inflammatory events that preceded the onset of CFS. Now, there are other criteria addressed in these regulations that include laboratory findings, additional signs, laboratory findings, and mental limitations, all of which should be documented in your medical records. If your ERISA claim is denied, you're going to have 180 days in which to file an appeal. That appeal is the trial of your case, and you or your attorney should get a copy of that long-term disability carrier or plan's claims file. You want to closely review the medical evidence, including the peer review reports, which were used to justify the claims denial on the basis that there was no objective evidence to support the diagnosis. You also want to get the policy or plan. Does the policy or plan actually require objective evidence? Now, once you understand the policy or the plan and the basis of the peer review opinion, it can be attacked in a number of ways. And I go about this by getting a statement from the physician addressing the diagnostic criteria they used in rendering the diagnosis and how you meet the criteria. I have the physician create a chronic fatigue syndrome residual functional capacity form that we Social Security lawyers have developed. Now, most CFS doctors are familiar with the form because they're routinely asked to complete it by their patients who are applying for Social Security disability benefits. I amend that form to ask questions about the basis of the diagnosis, questions about what the peer review doctor had to say about the diagnosis and the exam findings, and I have the doctor acknowledge SSR 14 as being consistent with the diagnostic criteria and that you met that criteria when they diagnosed you to have CFS. What I'm trying to do is tie together a winning argument to overcome this wrongful claim denial or termination. I think understanding Social Security rulings, knowing what's in your medical records, creating a strategy to address the basis of the denial, and securing a favorable and supportive CFS residual functional capacity form are really the keys to overcoming a wrongful claim denial or termination. Got it? Let's take a break.